Hi, everybody. It's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. This is coaching session number 44. And today we're going to continue our discussion on the nature of change. We might even finish it up depending on where our conversation leads. So last time around, we were talking about tension and its role in this whole change process. And just as a quick review, you guys already know that change is really not the issue. People being resistant to change, we already know that's just not accurate. What really is more accurate is that people want to gain or maintain control. And if we think a change is going to help us gain or maintain control, are we going to resist it or go along with it?
Go along with it.
Going to go along with it. And so if we think that that change is going to cost us control, then what are we going to do?
Fight it.
We're going to fight it. We're going to resist it because we're smart people. And that's the whole thing that, I want that to be pulled out of there is resistance is evidence of intelligence. There's some reason, some logic behind whatever that decision is to resist. Now, mind you, they could be totally wrong and making decisions based on inaccurate, incomplete information, or they could have too highly charged of an emotional state, which is preventing them from even looking at whatever facts and figures and details are readily available to them. So nevertheless, inside of their decision to either go along with the proposed change or go against it, they are still factoring this whole control thing, even though it could all be nothing more than an illusion or a delusion, as the case may be. So can you guys make room for that in your understanding of why we seek after control and even, things that don't make any sense? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. Because in that moment, it makes sense. And, we live in Sun City West. There's this recall election going on. Everyone's all off grid. It's amazing how the people who were actually successful at getting this recall vote to be called, they're basically feasting on people's anger, people's frustrations, all the upgrid emotions that we talk about: anger, grief, fear, some shame, but they're trying to cast shame on others. And we've actually confronted them about this. In fact, Angela was with me the day that we started to explore this whole thing, and we had a little bit of a confrontation. The person who's one of the advocates for this change is just so far upgrid herself that she's not really looking at facts and figures. In fact, she believes that these accusations, distortions, etc., are facts and figures, but it's not coming from a place of logic. It's coming from her emotional state. And I said to them, so all this presentation is really doing is getting a lot of people upset. And she said, that's what they want. So, Anja, am I remembering that those bits and pieces correctly?
Oh yeah, she said that's exactly what we want. And you said, but that turns me off. I can't be around this energy. And then she got in my face because she figured you didn't want it.
Yeah. And it's
she
like
wasn't giving up.
Right. Now think about how easy it is if you've got people who believe things are out of control, but their beliefs are not based on any facts, figures, etc., but because they got pulled into a tsunami of upgrade emotions, and it's carried them all away with it.
But I submit that they don't think something's going on until these people rattle their cages.
Exactly.
I really don't think they thought anything was wrong.
They're just susceptible, and this
tension, and that was it.
That's right, and it may very well be part of aging, whatever happens. But the population that lives here is all over the age of 55, and I believe the average age is 72 or 73. It's around there somewhere, and so it may very well be that there's a lot of these people who are just kind of depressed and angry and annoyed in general. And so, if you can come along and give them some sort of, content around which to
target,
correct and feel, then that's what they're going to jump on board.
A target.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I'm saying it's like we are all on a quest for control. And we use this gaining or losing control as justification for why we might be resisting or going along with something, but don't assume that our conclusion came from a careful examination of facts and figures. People can just get sucked into it. Now, obviously, when I'm teaching this in the first go round, I can't talk about that people are upgrading, they get pulled into it because they don't, those students don't have that content yet. All they know is that change is what change is, and people aren't necessarily resistant to change. They're resistant to losing control, or, gaining control, losing control. No, they're resistant to losing control. They're happy to go along with things that'll help them gain control. That's all my students usually know at this particular stage. Now we start introducing this thought that even if you desperately believe that something is going to help you to gain control, you still may not follow through and do what needs to be done. And that then pulls us into this question of, well, then what really drives the change process? Why do we pay attention to certain changes under certain circumstances and not pay any attention to others in other circumstances? What's really going on? And that's where we get to this concept of tension. So last time around, I gave you some definitions of tension. The tension is the level of physical, emotional, and intellectual activity a person's experiencing at any given moment in time. That tension is the amount of energy that's contained inside of a system. That ultimately tension determines what changes someone's going to make and when those changes will occur. And we said, wonderfully useful things like, in the absence of tension, there's no productivity. So the next time you're wondering, why aren't you getting something done, or why isn't somebody in your reality doing what it is that they said they were going to do and you agreed to do, blah, blah, the bottom line is they don't have enough tension to pay attention to what's really going on. So this is why we've always referred to the skill set that all of you are developing as tension management, because we know the outcome. We know the outcome is to gain control, and we know how we gain control is by making changes. We get all that, but ultimately what's going to happen and when it's going to happen is the world of tension management. And so whether we get hired by our clients to do sales training programs or productivity improvement programs, or you name it, ultimately what we are doing is tension management. And as you guys have heard me say on many an occasion, I believe life is tension management, that everything that we witness all day, every day is just tension management in action. And sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it's done poorly, and sometimes it's done with some ulterior motive, and sometimes it's coming from a genuine place, but it's still tension management, and we're all witnessing it all day, every day. Are we on the same page? Yes?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
And so I was showing you this little curve that we put together that shows the relationship between tension and productivity. And it's a very simple sort of thing. Again, my students at this stage of the usual training only know me for 30 minutes. And so I can't get into too much detail, but I would like to at least be able to make the point that as someone's level of tension gets higher and higher, there is an opportunity for productivity to go up as well. So there's a direct relationship between tension and paying attention to something that's going on. And so if I'm not paying attention to something, how productive can I possibly be? So the more of my attention something is going to grab, the greater the potential I have for doing productive sorts of work. The curve does show that at a certain point in time, the level of tension is going to be too much for a person to handle, and we're going to watch productivity take a nosedive. And when I brought that up, we started talking about Yerkes and Dodson, and it dawned on me that most of you on the call probably have no idea and no real care about knowing who Yerkes and Dodson were. But I thought, you're not the average group. I'm going to give you a quick glimpse into Yerkes and Dodson's work. Are you guys open to that, or?
I'm open.
Sure.
Good. Okay. So Yerkes and Dodson, you're going back to 1908 is when the inverted U theory of productivity was first put together. And so this is probably, although we include models that go all the way back, thousands of years, the ones that we tend to talk about more often than not in the merging of brilliance is these things that have happened since 1900. And the earliest model we talk about is Yerkes-Dodson Law. Now, that doesn't mean that I learned this one first. I'd already developed the change grid. We already had our levels of tension. And someone at some program, go 10 years into my career, and someone said, well, this sounds very much like the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U model. And I went like, does it? And so I didn't know who they were. I didn't build this program by looking at everything that everyone had already done. A great deal of the merging of brilliance is working backwards and saying, like, we know where we're at right now. We know our model. We know our concepts. Well, how many other people over the course of recorded history have had glimmers of this? And if we can stumble across now those old models and take a look at them, are they going to reinforce what we kind of did a quantum leap to? Or are we going to learn something from them that our model doesn't contain yet? Or can we refine their model a little bit? So it's working together, but it's a very interesting exercise to do a backwards historical examination of all the different models in human behavior that have been proposed. What's particularly fun about doing that is that we don't limit models to those that came from a scientific approach or an academic approach. There are many, many models that were proposed by individuals long before universities even existed, long before medicine or mental science, psychology had even been proposed, even named. So it's kind of fun to just say, now, brilliance comes to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so rather than judging how they got there, which may very well be fascinating, but what's their model look like? And does that model work? So I have a long story to say, this is the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U model. They've come up with a lot of other names for it over time, but this is it in a nutshell. They were basically saying that at what level of sensory arousal, and arousal is a problematic word today. I promise you, if I use that word in front of a regular audience, I'm going to hear giggles. And so I can't use that word anymore. But back in 1908, this word was interpreted and understood to mean sensory arousal. So as your eyes, your ears, your tactical senses, as more and more information is being gathered by these organs, whatever, we're getting, our senses are being aroused. Something is stimulating whatever's going on with that. Well, we happen to have a different word for that. And you already saw it. We refer to this as tension. So as the amount of tension
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure, please do.
Are these three colors, are they original to their chart?
No, the original diagram back in 1908, they would have had very little, if any, ability to colorize any sort of a graphic. So everything back in 1908 was probably just going to be black and white. And if there was color, you figure they had to have someone come in and hand color it after the fact. I could be wrong, but I don't think the world of printing in 1908 was all that color friendly yet. Some of you guys may know better than I do. And by the way, this is not their actual diagram. I would have to go back to their original paper to find the original diagram. But I can tell you, if you do a Google search on Yerkes-Dodson Law or inverted U theory, you're going to find not dozens, but hundreds upon hundreds of different graphics that other people have designed, labeled in different ways. So these are not even the labels. They had a very simple one. They just said arousal is across the x-axis from low to high, and performance is also going to be on the y-axis, and it's going to go from low to high. All right, that's all they had. That was their model. And they drew a bell curve. And basically, they were just trying to show that at a moderate level of sensory arousal, they're calling that optimal, but it's a moderate level of sensory arousal, we would experience maximum productivity. Now, they would call it maximum, but that's not true. Look, there's a gap here between strong performance and this optimal level of performance. And so they might very well be indicating in this particular graphic that it wasn't a 100% productivity thing at 50% arousal, that there was still opportunities for more performance, but it apparently didn't have much to do with arousal. So yeah. Now, I'm sure many of you on the call have seen similar diagrams before, but this one is probably just as good as any of the rest. Yeah. Yep, yep, yep. So
Yep.
now, they basically described someone who had very low arousal, which they predicted would mean weak performance, as fatigue or sleepiness. I don't think that tells the whole story. It may very well be that what is really happening is that we're unaware of something. If we have no sensory input coming to us about that particular activity, well, then how do we even know it exists? So I think that there's a lot more happening before fatigue and sleepiness comes into play. And I'm not even sure that that's it. I would say that as my level of arousal goes up, coming to a point of fatigue and sleepiness hardly represents an enhancement to performance. If anything, I was fatigued and sleeping when performance was at its lowest possible point. Now, at least I'm awake. I'm alert. I'm noticing things. So if anything, I might still be tired, but nevertheless, my weak performance is being demonstrated by a little bit of curiosity, etc. Yeah. Can you guys resonate more with me than what this diagram is trying to show us?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the way that I always like to describe the lowest point of apathy and why this awareness curve or hypo awareness, and when we look at the engagement rings, is there, and I know this is hardly nature of change, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I always say a good example of that moment in life is when you wake up and you hear the sound of rain hitting your window pane. All right, that's all that it is. You haven't even opened your eyes yet, but there you are laying in bed, very comfy in a cool spot on the pillow. And there you hear this little sound of rain hitting the window or hitting the roof line or whatever. This is where you start to become aware of something. But awareness isn't like you jump out of bed and go, get your work done. This level of awareness is, or this level of arousal, if you were, that would make you that aware of what's going on, might be enough for you to just say in the voice in your head, it's raining. And that's it. Now, as you lay there a little bit longer, you might be thinking, it's raining and I left my car outside and the windows are down. Okay, what just happened to your level of sensory arousal? What just
Went
happened?
way up.
It went way up. And what's the likelihood now that we're going to see a much stronger evidence of performance displayed?
More likely.
Yeah, much more likely, because now if something's got your attention. Maybe that was halfway. I just wanted to throw out there to say, I can go from low to high very quickly. And my performance can change very quickly. One of my challenges with bell curves is that it always feels like this is such a gentle progression, that we're just, as we get more and more aroused, we're going to reach out, to this optimal level. And they make it sound or visually seem like it's going to be something so wonderful, to experience. And our world of tension management says, no, this could happen in a millisecond. I'll give you another one. You're laying there in the same bed on the same rainy day, and you're not even awake yet. And suddenly the loudest thunderclap you've ever heard shakes, and the sound waves shake your house. Are you going to open up your eyes and goes like, oh, it's raining? Or right, you're going to go like, wait, did that hit the house? am I in this storm? You guys get the idea. It can be very dramatic very quickly. Now, it says here that as the level of arousal, level of tension goes up, sensory arousal goes up, you're going to go beyond that halfway point, that green kind of moderate zone, and you're going to end up in trouble. And there you're going to have decreasing performance due to increasing stress and anxiety. And down here, you've got strong stress, anxiety, impaired performance. Okay, well, okay, I can't argue with it that it really happens, but they make it seem like it tapers off ever so gracefully.
No, that's when you trip on the rug running out to the car.
Yeah, there it is. Exactly. So, yeah, so I just think that while it may very well be able to represent the concept in its most simple terms as a bell curve, that doesn't mean that we live it as a bell curve, or that even if we do live it as a bell curve, that everyone's bell curve looks the same. Maybe at a moderate level of sensory arousal, you guys actually have strongest level of performance. It really does depend, because what happens if you get to have too much? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that this bell curve leaves a gap, and that gap is, what's the answer to how do you achieve maximum performance? Right? Well, that's not shown. There's a gap here, and hopefully that's not over, too much for everybody. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, they said, oh, it really isn't about arousal. The word we should be using is stress. And normally that comes from the camp of people who talk about the differences between eustress and distress. So eustress is a level of, or a type of form, if you will, of tension, of stress that actually makes you more attentive, more productive. It's useful to you. It's EU, by the way, EUSTRESS, but it's useful stress. And then distress is stress that works against you. Well, they say that distress only occurs when stress is very high. And I believe that too low of a level of stress is just as damaging or potentially just as problematic. So if we want to have optimal performance and we want this to be the theme of our day, then we don't want to be too low or too high, because too low, nothing's getting done, and too high, nothing's getting done.
Right, or it's not getting done right.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're grabbing at straws, reacting into something instead of really being proactive, thoughtful, etc. So, so I've been hunting for, well, what word would they use to describe someone who's at the low end of stress? Because it isn't eustress yet. It's not really being performance, and it isn't this kind of distress.
I would say flaccid if you're using arousal.
There you are. Exactly. There you are. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's right. We'll give you grand points. Too bad Shags isn't on the call. He would have loved that totally. Here comes. Okay. So anyway, so
Everybody else not so much.
Yeah. And so I'm bringing this up only to say that while they didn't bother doing this in Yerkes-Dodson, they did do that. That doesn't mean it was never done. Very soon after Yerkes and Dodson, models started being displayed. Let me open up another curve. Oh, this is going to be tiny, but I'll zoom in. You can see enough of it. And they would say that it was the level of difficulty versus the level of ability. This is the C zone, which by the Kriegers. I don't know who put expertise. That's not it. Their actual model says the level of ability versus the level of difficulty. And that if you had a low level of ability and a high level of difficulty, you'd be in the panic zone. If you had a high level of ability and a low level of difficulty, you'd be in the drone zone. And if you had a moderate level of difficulty and a moderate level of ability, you'd be in the C zone, confident, committed. This is where that. So C zone, peak performance under pressure, was the name of the book they published that presented this particular diagram. And by the way, their diagram is no more complex than this. It just has two little scales, two little things, three little zones, and you're good to go. So I said, well, there's no reason why this can't map to this bell curve. We just have to shift it up on its point. You guys with me? We have to be able to shift this up
Yeah.
on a point. And that point needed to be the drone zone is where we ended up kind of putting it all together. Or no, for their model, yeah, it would have been right here, would have been the center point. And the C zone would have been this green area. And the drone zone would have been over here. And the panic zone would be over here. So can you guys feel how these models actually do resonate with one another? They can be manipulated a little bit to overlay rather effortlessly. And from that overlay, we get a lot more meaning from what's going on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
With me? Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
All right. So let me put these things away for just a second. I might as well put a few more just so you can see. This is somebody else's idea of Yerkes-Dodson performance versus the level of stress, over arousal, under arousal. Over here, we're comfortable. Here, we're growing. Here, we're in distress. Over here, they got breakdown, burnout. I don't know who put this together. I don't know that it's particularly wrong in any way. This all feels like it would map all right. But again, I'm a big believer that bell curves can be skewed, and that's what we're going to be getting into. Another one, this is the stress arc. They decided to actually find a way to print things out. This came from, Dreams Time is a source for getting graphics. That's why you see lots of copyrights or thing, Dreams Time, you can buy this image. But here they're saying stress occurs when perceived pressure on an individual exceeds ability to maintain resilience. Yeah. Okay, I can't argue with that, but I don't know that it's all about just resilience. But let's see what they say. They say peak performance is at the top. Notice they haven't bothered with their axes. Over here on the far left, you're unaware. You go up from unaware to bored to too comfortable, interested, motivated, creative. These words are not in any kind of a logical order as far as I can determine. They are more things that might happen along the way. Unaware, definitely, I would agree with that. But I don't think that creativity follows motivation. It may very well be that creativity leads to motivation, or motivation is what we're actually looking at as we move along this arc. Yeah, so I would say the further up I go, the more motivated I become. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. And then over here on the not so nice side, it says that once I get past the halfway point for this stress level, productive eustress, I'm going to start feeling tired. I don't know that I feel tired right away. When my sensory overload or my sensory load gets to be a bit higher than average, is that when I start becoming tired, indecisive, fuzzy mind, exhausted? Irritable, anxious, burnout. I don't disagree that these things happen on this side of things, but I also don't think they occur in this particular order, if that was their intention when they put this together. So bottom line is I would never pay for this illustration. It doesn't, it's not right. Okay, questions, thoughts? We still on board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's another one coming. Someone decided to put this together. This one was interesting. I don't know who the helpful professor is, but if you go to helpfulprofessor.com, I'm sure some stuff will be happening there. The Yerkes-Dodson law suggests there's an optimal level of arousal for peak performance. Not too much, not too little. While higher arousal benefits simple tasks, moderate arousal benefits complex tasks. So this is the first I've stumbled across that seems to be looking now at the activity rather than at the person overall. And obviously I could make some room for this, but again, I wonder, why don't these bell curves go up to the top of good? Where's great? Where's best ever kind of thing? Where's the rest of this scale? So this is a very simple concept that they're drawing in. I think they were just going for the graphic element because from a scientific perspective, I would have to take this subtle uptick on both sides of the bell curve to mean something, that this is more of an excerpt of a waveform that's occurring. How many of you don't care about that? So, yeah, I just think it was someone decided to throw together a cute little diagram. And then you get this one. which is also rather problematic in its own way. But at least they're showing that there's a lot more happening. But overwhelming pressure versus healthy pressure, performance versus demands. I don't think the demands parallels sensory arousal. I mean, our senses are just gathering the information. The demand is going to come across more on the challenge side of things, and performance is going to be the result. So can you kind of see that whoever Waking Waves is doing something very different with this curve, a zone of delusion. Huh. I can't take this anymore. I feel anxious and unfocused. Now I'm really in the zone. Now that would obviously map to the C zone, peak performance under pressure. But then as you go, in our lingo, upgrade from that, do you really start to feel fatigued? I would say yes to overwhelm. I would say yes to perhaps distracted, or usually distracted, but exhaustion, anxiety, burnout. See, they're thinking there's not a time when extreme stress begins to appear like profound apathy. So when I'm really fatigued, fatigue is not an upgrade response. Fatigue happens when you get so far up grid that you bash through that little barrier. Again, if we look at the change grid as a tube and come around the other side where the highest point of tension comes right up against the lowest point of apathy. There are many times that stressful people display what we refer to as apparent apathy. So if you're tired, if you're exhausted, if you're all these things, these are things we would expect to find down grid. But if we go too far up grid, our body's self-preservation mode gets kicked in, and it says, see what happens when I allow you to consciously participate in the world around you. Look what you do to yourself. And so I'm going to shut you down. I'm going to
stop.
Right, right. And so your brain is going to move you into behaviors that appear to be apathy. But those of us who have looked at these paradoxical response states, we know that the highest level of tension isn't stress. The highest level of tension is apparent apathy. Similarly, the lowest level of tension isn't apathy. The lowest level of tension is apparent stress. And what we're saying is that as your level of tension gets lower and lower and lower, until you reach the point at coordinates 12 and 0, that your body should just be giving up and, dying a very peaceful sort of death, your brain comes along and says, see what happens when we let you consciously participate? We can't let you die. Self-preservation is our number one, target for the day. And so, no, we're going to kick in some tension. We're going to, suddenly give you thoughts, feelings, actions, energy that's going to reverse things. And you can see that in a emergency room setting, watching the monitors. Things don't flatline. Just before a person flatlines, the monitors go crazy because your body is throwing every remaining piece of energy it's got into survival. And so, all right. So anyway, again, as we look at these kinds of models, we want to kind of balance being appreciative with being critical. I can appreciate what this is showing us that resonates with what we already know to really be true. But I believe that our level of knowledge about this subject matter at this point in time exceeds whatever this diagram was trying to communicate. And so we can take layer upon layer of refinements to what it is that we're looking at. Okay. All right. Thoughts about any of that? Questions, T, Tom?
Well, I like the fact that you brought up that things don't necessarily happen in a predictable fashion. That maybe somebody with low stress, the productivity does increase like that, but somebody with high stress, I wouldn't say they taper off like that. They just nosedive.
Yeah. And that's, we're going to get back to our precious little diagram in a second, but I think about it's got to be activity specific. So whatever that model was, it was saying it's about complex versus simple tasks. So at what level of tension do you guys think you would do the best job of putting together a jigsaw puzzle? You
One's
know,
got the corners and most of the frame.
yeah, this is it. It's like we could approach it, but we don't need to be 50% stimulated. Now, if it was a competition and you've got teams of 4 people at I'm sure there's got to be jigsaw puzzle competitions all over the world. And so everybody gets the exact same puzzle and they all start at the exact same time. Well, did you just feel that the task changed in some significant way? And we need to be perhaps more attentive, more stimulated, better hand-eye coordination, better ability to rotate things spatially in our brain to figure out where is it going to fix, more discerning in slight deviations in color, so we know where on the overall illustration this color, this hue is actually going to be. Can you kind of feel like in that situation, I'd probably benefit from a higher level of sensory arousal?
For sure.
Yeah. And so, because now it's a more complex task. Now, if I'm doing surgery, well, is it a routine surgery and everything's going fine and then something goes wrong? Because when something goes wrong, what do you think should happen to people's sensory arousal?
Heightened.
Yeah, it should be heightened, and maybe that's going to move them into more of a stress kind of mode. I would like to think that they aren't suddenly maybe a little anxious, but I don't think halfway or a little bit past peak performance, they're going to be tired and say, oh no, now something went wrong and now I'm overstimulated. And so, oops. No. So again, without harping on it any longer than I already have, I believe the reason why humans have been gifted with the possibilities of this sensory arousal and its impact on performance happening across a broader spectrum is very much for why I've just described this. There are times when we have the ability to handle higher levels of arousal, and it serves us well, and other times where it would work against us. It's got to be situational.
Right.
Okay, thoughts, comments on any of this?
I looked at this mood card that I have, warm hands, whatever, because I was looking at this color. And, burnout is, of course, black, but it's similar to what they have on moods, too.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've often seen any kind of a model about moods that people might, or even mind states. It seems that their colors map very well to this little rainbow.
Yeah.
When have we ever seen them out? So I think the mood cards would probably overlay on this. Very interesting. How many cards are in the mood set?
There's different ones, but the one of them I have has 4. So okay. It's kind of the rainbow, but when you're down in burnout or you're highly stressed, it's black.
Yeah. All right.
So, black. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What's a mood card?
Well, I'll tell you that people in the human development industry, particularly people that have more of a coaching kind of a thing, coming at it from a bit more of a creative psychological thing, they can actually develop these decks of cards. And you could give these decks of cards to a client and let them go through and pull out the 1 or the 2 or the 5 that seem to resonate with what they're going on. And you learn a great deal from the cards they've chosen and the cards that they didn't choose.
Interesting.
Yeah, others will do cards as though you are going through a process. And where are you in that process? So I don't know which set of mood cards T uses. T, is there a specific name for the set you use?
Oh, it just is called mood card. I was going to give it to some clients around. It says stress rule. Warm hands are relaxed, cold hands are tense, but that's not necessarily true either.
Right.
On this card, I'm not crazy about it, but it was cheap. But another one that I've had for years, and you know, it kind of follows you, and then it gives you stuff on the back how you can change your mindset of tension.
Yep. I've seen a lot of those cards, and some of them are attributed, by the way, to some very what's new age kinds of things. Like I know there's a set of goddess cards. There's a set of fairy cards. But pretty much they all function the same way. You go through, you find whichever one best describes what you're doing, or maybe you're doing a meditation, you just pull one out randomly and you look at what it's saying on both sides, because one side is always going to be more prescriptive and the other side is going to be more descriptive.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can buy them. They're readily available if you go to Amazon, or if you were walking to. Do bookstores still exist? So
yeah, but they all carry
in some places
books and children's.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's been so long since I've actually gone shopping in a brick and mortar environment. I don't even know what's common anymore.
There's a Barnes and Noble not too far on Bell.
Yeah, I'll bet you anything they'd have all kinds of different options of these cards, kinds of
they have
things.
lots of gift items and a lot of children's toys and albums.
Well, and we developed our own set many years ago when we were cruising a lot on Princess. One of the things I wanted to be able to do was to get hired by Princess to do relationship workshops that would culminate in the captain of the ship renewing everyone's vows.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it's the love boat, you know, blah, 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 love boat.
Great idea, though.
So I had something that we would do called, it was about loving, adding loving to life. So we had these decks. There was a blue deck and a pink deck, and each one had 52 ways of adding more loving into life. And we would have everyone in the group would get the card, and we would tell, obviously there was a deck for the guys and a deck for the gals, and we would say, okay, pull out card number whatever it is and do it. And you know, keep it. And so like one of the cards was for the gals, and we would say, okay, gals, grab out card number 25 or 24, whichever one that it was. Don't show it to your partner, but read it over. And they'd read it over and there'd suddenly be giggles. And then we'd say, now on the count of three, all of you turn to your partner and you know, tell what it says. And so they would all turn to their partner, and all at once they said, "Hi, Tiger." That was it. The whole card just says, just turn to your guy and say "Hi, Tiger" to him, because every guy wants to know they're the tiger, you know, this is all it. And the guy's set up better and they smile a little bit more. Well, for the rest of the cruise, you keep hearing these women blurt out "Hi, Tiger," and every guy kind of turns, you know.
Oh,
Are you talking to me? But yeah, it was romance 104, 104 ways to put more loving into life.
Oh,
So 2 decks of cards there. But point is, it's you know, the card things exist for all kinds of purposes. Some of them really fun, and yeah, they're always worth you know, flipping through. If the deck's open, go ahead, see what's inside of it, see how they intend to use it.
interesting.
All right, anyway, let me close a few of these diagrams. I have a lot more of these I could show you, but I think you kind of get the point that this concept at its heart that we're talking about for tension management, it goes back a very long way. For us, the big difference is we believe that our society or our civilization has grown increasingly dysfunctional over time as a result of our increased function that we've developed over time. So bask in that for just a second. Our increased functionality has ultimately led to this curve looking the way that it is. What I mean by that is that because of the amount of stimulus that we are all exposed to, again, it's still sensory stimulus, it's still arousal that we're all exposed to all day, every day, we have been able to reach a point where we can all handle and function quite well under levels of sensory arousal that would have been totally debilitating to people 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Can you imagine if suddenly next to you appeared someone from the early 1800s, and after the initial shock is over and done with, you have to explain to them why in your hand you hold something that can answer virtually every question, that can allow you to speak to anyone on the planet in an instant, that, you know what I mean? So you just show them, try to explain a cell phone to somebody and watch how overwhelmed they become. So basically, I'm just saying that over the course of time, we have grown increasingly resilient, increasingly functional at levels of arousal that would have been profoundly dysfunctional not all that long ago. You guys with me on that? Yeah,
Mhm.
agree, disagree? Yeah. And so for me, that's why it's not a bell curve anymore. So Susan, what would you like to add?
And nothing. I just wanted to come back on mute, off mute.
Okay, good. Well, you're always welcome. Chime in anytime. But I think we see this all day. You know, how many of you realize that the expectations that are placed on someone living today are very different than the expectations of 100 years ago? You
Oh,
know,
of course.
what a day, what were you even able to fit in a given day?
Well,
Was
that's what I
very
was
different.
wondering. What if you got shipped back to them? What
Well,
if we had to churn our own butter? What if we had to milk our own cows? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
well, I think we would
How would
we'd
we-
adjust sooner or later because humans are adaptable by nature. But I think that at first we would find these activities very understimulating.
Really, I think a lot of them would be very physically demanding.
Well, they would be, but initially we'd kind of go like churning butter. I mean, how tough could that possibly be? And then you do it for an hour or two and you realize, oh no, my shoulders are screaming. I need to go for, whatever therapy we can. So, but I think that ultimately we would find that the environment was not stimulating enough until we became educated enough about the things that are stimulating, that do need to be done.
I want to do it and find out.
Well, I think you can. In fact, the PBS, although I don't know how accurate they were able to do it. You remember that for a long time, they had a series of programs where they would take people and put them back in Victorian times and say, okay, you're going to be one of the servants and you're going to be one of the thing. And they had to live that way for, I don't know if it was a month or 90 days or whatever, but they actually went back in time and tried to live. And they found out how physically demanding life was for certain people and how really lazy other people could become. And so at the end of it, it's all a big debrief: who was able to do it, who wasn't. I know there was one where it was called Prairie House, and they took people who would have been trying to live like the earliest settlers moving west in the US. And that one took a very different turn because they were unable to gather enough food and enough firewood to survive the winter. And so they knew that this is a family who back then would have died. And so they ended up intervening before it got too bad. But these people were miserable. So they've tried to do that. But again, how accurate can that experience be if you've got television crews and production teams all around you?
Right. And imagine our olfactory system. It's got to be foul back then.
Foul, absolutely foul. Yeah. And so this is my point, though. It's kind of like we have developed this ability. On the one hand, yeah, we don't get exposed to stressors that were commonplace long ago, but we get bombarded with messages. That's my whole point, is that when we talk about our mental capabilities and the emotional capabilities that are brought along with that, no one has ever in history experienced the level of messaging that we're bombarded with literally every moment of every day. And so we've grown to tolerate that, to expect it. And some people find themselves incapable of functioning if that is taken away from them. If that level of stimulation isn't there, they end up dropping very far down grid, which then in turn makes them very stressed. And so they'll come back around and have this collapse. But it's not a tapering off. I think that we reach a certain point, and after that, we're done. We're just plain done.
Well, take the indigenous people.
Yep.
Who have no internet service, and like this country is on the march to get internet service to everybody. I think they're better off without it.
Well, right. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. These civilizations who have never been exposed to modern man might believe that airplanes are gods, but I'm telling you, they're better off. Leave them out of this, So,
Wow.
yeah. Okay, anyway, point is, we live in the civilization we live in, and this particular civilization has become very adept at managing very high levels of productive tension before finding it problematic. So we're really good at pulling that part of the bell curve. And notice that our bell curve goes all the way up to the highest point. So this is, well, at least it should. I'm the one who drew it. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to imply there. All right.
So are you saying that our threshold of activation changes
Yes.
with society?
Absolutely. Our threshold of activation and our threshold of delegation are very much things that are, although there's a default location, as we get into this in greater detail, you guys will find out that the actual location of our thresholds depends on the individual, on the activity itself, and on the specific moment in time. And when I'm talking about specific moments in time, although we tend to talk about, have I caught you on a good day or a bad day, we can actually say, well, also means time over the course of civilization. So did we find it enough to prompt us to hit a threshold of activation? And there's cultural distinctions, all sorts of things that come into play, how we were raised, etc. How many of you were raised that when your parents told you to do something, that you just needed to regard it as something you might consider doing at some point in time?
Not me.
Our threshold, right? Our threshold.
Tell that to my dad.
Yeah, there you go. Our threshold of activation for doing what our parents told us to do was very different for our generation than it may very well be for some of the people in today's generation. Yeah, can we make room for that? Can we kind of see how that might be true? Kids seem to be more rebellious, mostly because if you treat them wrong, they can do a posting on social media. Next thing you know is
Right.
social
Or
services.
they frickin' shoot you.
Well, there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, that happens too. That happens too. All right, so this is my little point about why our curve deviates. So we honor and celebrate all the roots that led us to where we are today, but we know that this is something that is also happening. Dysfunction is affecting people's what this one they want to call this the stress performance curve. All right, well, you can call it that, but we're going to tell you it's changed because of dysfunction. Now, we just have a few minutes left. And so let me just show you what we've talked enough about the threshold, right? You guys know that the threshold is something that you have to hit before you're actually going to do something. And we do show that it's at the highest level. That's where people hit their threshold. That's true enough when people are going through the nature of change. But later on, as you guys already know, your threshold can be very different. You don't need to be this high up in tension to hit a threshold of activation. Or the simple example I give you is that the threshold of activation you touch to put a loaf of bread in your shopping cart is different than the amount of tension necessary for you to buy a $500,000 house, right? So it's a different thing. Yep.
Just a tad.
Yeah, just a tad, but different activities, different thresholds. Now, I still want to be able to prove out to you guys how critical tension really is in this whole dynamic, why being a good tension manager for yourself and for others is so vitally important. And that's what this little matrix is here to do. Now, this is usually just a fun little exercise that we use at the close of this nature of change little piece. But I say, anytime someone is considering making a change in any area of their life, there are three variables that come into play. Those variables are logic, feasibility, and tension. And so I'm going to put you in a series of scenarios, and all I want you to do is tell me, do you believe the change is going to take place? So the first one is that the person says, yeah, whatever this change is makes complete and total sense. It's very logical, no argument there. And by the way, by logical, I mean it's going to give me what I want. And what do I really want? What's my one word?
Control.
I want control. It's a logical, it's going to help me get what I want. It makes good sense. All the logic is checked. Feasibility, all changes require the availability of certain resources. Different changes need different resources, but I don't know how many changes we ever make that required no resources whatsoever, particularly because time and energy are resources in and of themselves. And so feasibility has to come into play. Do I have enough of whatever it is I need to have in order to be able to move forward? So in this particular case, yes, I've got all the resources that I need. And then the third requirement is that of tension. I have to have enough tension to pay attention to what's going on. And ultimately, I need to be at what specific level of tension?
The threshold.
I got to be at the threshold of activation. So if it's logical, feasible, and I'm at the threshold, what's the outcome going to be?
Yes.
Yep.
Success.
I'm going to change. Now, if I make the joke, if this is the situation you're in and the person doesn't make the change, then we got to figure out where's the problem. Was there a gap in logic? Was there a gap in feasibility? Or was there a problem with tension? So if it's yes, 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 it should be yes. And if it isn't, I promise you, one of those yeses needs to be a no. And so we'll do a deeper dive. Next scenario. That was the perfect world. The next scenario, we get this one. The person examines whatever it is they're being told to do, and they go like, well, you know, it's not perfect. I can kind of see how it makes some sense, but what about this? What about this? And so there's some issue on logic. It's not to suggest that it's 100% illogical. That's not it. It's just saying there's a glitch as far as logic goes. That being said, the person has got all the resources that they need to make it happen, and they find their current situation troublesome enough that they know they got to do something definitive to change it. So tension's at the what?
Threshold.
What's likely to occur? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So even though there is a problem with logic, if the person reaches their threshold of activation, they follow through and take action. This is our everyday life as consumers, if you will. Very, very rarely, as we go looking for something, do we find the perfect solution, you know, the perfect thing at the first try. We know we got to go shopping, which means we've got to look at what's available to us and decide of those things available to us, which one is going to make the most sense for us to end up buying. Or if I've got multiple directions I could go, I got to go, well, logically, which one's going to serve me best, blah, blah, blah. Things don't have to be perfect in terms of logic in order for me to follow through and do whatever needs to be done. How many of you have spent plenty of time and resources doing things, making changes that were not perfect, but they were close enough that they still made sense to do?
Lots.
Yep.
Okay, this is daily
All the
life.
time.
Daily life, daily life. The next scenario is this one. Logic, no problem at all. It makes complete and total sense. But there's a problem as far as feasibility is concerned. There's not quite enough of whatever the resources are that need to be there. There could be a lot of one resource and not enough of another one, but one way or another, there's a question of feasibility. And then that being said, the person still says, but I know I need to do something. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. What do you think will happen?
It'll get done.
It'll still get done. Now, in all seriousness, that's less likely to happen than the one before it. And that's less likely to happen than the one before it. But the thought that feasibility is a deal breaker is not always true. I mean, if you have no resources whatsoever, I would still say you're going to try to make it happen. If it's totally logical and your tension is at a high enough level, I believe you're going to do that, because this line item is where there's a will, there's a way. And so you may need to rearrange resources, you may need to borrow resources, but if you can get those feasibility issues, even if you just think you can get them taken care of, you may very well follow through and do it. This is where there's a will, there's a way. It's in fact, by the way, because of this line item that the credit card industry was born. The whole point of credit cards, or credit period, is that it makes the unfeasible feasible. So I got ways of calling in favors. I got ways of converting one resource to another. I've got ways of things that on the surface seem unfeasible. I can make them a little bit more feasible. I've always believed that I may not be able to have everything I want in life, but I know for certain I can have anything I want in life. I just have to choose. And then, make my actions follow through on whatever it is. So maybe not everything, but I think we can have anything. Where there's a will, there's a way. Have we all seen plenty of evidence of this in our own lives to know that this line item also holds true?
Sure.
Sure. All right. And so this is where there's a will, there's a way. Here's this one. Let's take a look and see what happens now. There's a problem as far as logic, and there's a problem as far as feasibility, but the person's at their threshold of activation. So they're
going to do something.
They're geek, they're enthusiastic, they're their threshold. Yes, this one has a likelihood to happen. We would refer to this as impulsive decision making, impulsive buying, whatever it is. But how many of you have gone to a sporting event, and bought the cheese hat, bought the giant foam finger, or whatever it is? Is it logical for you to have such a thing? Was that really the best use of your resources? Or do you kind of go like, I don't know why I bought it. I never should have spent the money, but don't you love it? So there's this impulsive. I would actually believe that a great deal of the money that people spend is spent on this in this scenario. Buy things we don't really need, and whether we have the resources or not, it's not a good use of resources, but we do have those. So, logic, feasibility may not be perfect, but if the tension is where it needs to be, look what we do. We follow through and do it. All right. So far, you guys on board with me on this? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But now
I think you need another column.
Yeah. What's that other column? Tell me.
Consequences of what you do.
Interestingly enough, that is something that was brought up, and it ends up becoming, as you do the evaluation of the decision that you made, you start to re-examine the logic, and the logic came with consequences, because we talk about, in those four little quadrants where we talk about things I want to gain, things I want to lose, things I don't want to gain and don't want to lose. Those bottom two are those consequences, or those are the things you've got to be able to put it into play, and that's when people end up having regret. Yeah.
Regret.
So now look at this last scenario though. This person says, what am I doing? Who am I? Click here, press here. Yes, okay. It's completely and totally logical. It's totally feasible. You've got all the resources that you need and then some. But you just don't have enough tension to pay attention to it. You're not at your threshold of activation. You're going to buy or not buy?
Unlike
Not buy.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so, and how often do you find people that know exactly what it is that they need to do to gain control in their lives? They've got all of the resources they need and then some, but the truth be told, they do not find their current situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change it. And as a result, because that level of tension is not where it needs to be, they're going to decide not to take action. Now, does that serve them well? I would say no, because it was logical.
Absolutely not.
But how many of you know people right now who are in this yes, yes, no situation?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when we look at this matrix, we can see that not only is tension one of the three variables, it is actually the governing variable. It's the ruling variable. Every time tension is present at a high enough level, that's that threshold, the people will follow through and do that. Just keep in, but the moment tension is not at the threshold, regardless of logic, regardless of feasibility, the person is not going to change. So this is what concerns us when we talk about like that recall election that the community is having. They just got a whole lot of people to hit their threshold of activation. No one's looking at the logic. No one's looking at the feasibility, but they got so upset, so activated, so sensorily aroused that they're up there, that threshold of activation. They're going to follow through based on those emotions, based on that. You guys is anybody else mortified? You know?
Don't
Well,
get confused.
and what should have got their attention was the $7,500 it was going to cost to do this thing.
That's
Right,
right.
and don't you think in addition to consequences, you need a column for, are you an idiot?
Well,
Well, you need
Intelligence for-
accountability.
Yeah,
interestingly enough, that has also been brought up before, and it was decided falls into the category of it could be logical if you consider the outcome, stupid people, but feasibility. You have to have enough gray matter between your ears
Yep.
to be able to really understand something. And there are a lot of stupid people out there who are still able to make decisions.
driving cars and procreating.
I'm telling you, this is exactly right. You're exactly right.
Mhm.
So when we talk about tension management, it really is about understanding this little matrix and then recognizing that every situation we encounter in our daily lives is one or a variation on one of these scenarios. And ultimately, we need to recognize that while tension might be the one that really controls it, it really shouldn't be. In a world we live in, line item number 5, line item number 4, this is the world that we live in. We want to live in yes, 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 yes. We
Mhm.
want to make sure that every change we make is logical, feasible, that there is good tension behind it so we follow through and get the thing done. That's what we want. But I can tell you, as someone who does coaching and counseling and consulting and all those kinds of things, most of our clients are trapped in one of these bottom 2 lines. So they got a lot of impulsive stuff going on, or they've got a lot of realistic stuff they're not following through on. This seems to be who we end up dealing with. Yeah, we can help people solve problems about feasibility, but that's, you got something to sell. You're going to make sure that you can take care of feasibility issues, because if you do that, you get the best situation. And logic, we just got to go. All we can really do is the best we can do, but let's build that. So just to finish this up, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to sales organizations, and I usually start by observing their sales behaviors and the results they're getting. And I can't tell you how often we've got sales representatives out there who are failing to get a yes, and they think it's because they haven't proven the logic. Or they think that because they haven't gotten the yes, they have to do something to lower the price to make it more feasible. When the truth be told, that hesitancy to move forward may have nothing to do with logic and nothing to do with feasibility at all. It really is just a matter of tension management. And sooner or later, you've got to get that level of tension where it needs to be. So hopefully,
but we're fighting, don't you think, T? We're fighting the social media. Everything is based now on attention and attention,
right.
and we're stirring up people on social media, and logic is lost because critical thinking is, the neocortex is withering away because of the short circuit due to social media again.
That
So
is
I don't
correct.
even see much logic left.
Well, I don't see much like, I know that the cure is that we've got to look again at logic and feasibility. We have to be critical in our thinking. But you're absolutely right that when it comes to the world of advertising and sales, so social media only exists because money can be made from it. So the only reason why it's happening is because they realize how easy it is to simply manipulate people's levels of productive tension. And if I can do that, I'm going to get the result. And people who try to counteract to this by going to logic and feasibility, you're fighting the war with the wrong set of weapons. Yep.
That's why you can gamble on television, and I'm from your own home right now.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go.
That's right.
All right, so that's usually where the nature of change ends. I do want to talk to you a little bit more our next time around, just to talk about ethics, because there are some ethics that we need to look at that are going to govern tension management. And to bring it all full circle, I want to make sure that we do talk a little bit about that. But today's job is for you guys to take a screenshot of this right here. Let me just do this. Da, 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 da. There's a screenshot I just took, and I'm about to chat that over to all of you guys, except it just disappeared, so I got to go find it. It'll be here somewhere. There it is. Drag it in here. Okay, you guys got to drag that to your desktop as soon as it opens up. So you got to click on that and drag it if you want to have that. But that's what I want you to just kind of be aware of in the next week. How often are you able to recognize which of these scenarios is happening at a given moment in time? Yeah. Yeah.
You know, at some point, T, could we talk about the hysteria? I just as an example, I asked this woman if she could change because the guy wants to extend. He's got 2 pets. He works 12 hours a day. She's only here for a couple of days. Got it arranged where she could have the neighbor's cottage. So she gets a full house, not just an apartment, for the same price. And he usually charges 3 times. Everything works. She is so stressed out. She's ready to sue me because she's having I just gave her a free upgrade. I made it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
Everybody is so reactionary. They can't handle.
Because they're already so far upgrade to begin with that very little pushes them over.
Exactly. It's crazy. And there's no logic. The logic is you just got a free upgrade. You're getting a full house. Is it? But they don't see that. They are only obsessed with. This is so stressful on me. I'm going to have
only fight tension with tension. That's how we get them to think around. You know, if you say things to her like, if you want to give up the larger home and the blah blah blah, then let me just arrange to have the person in the cottage right now move next door, and we'll put all. Oh no, I don't want to lose that. Oh, okay, it's a better property.
But non-rational people are not subject to rational conversation.
This is correct. This is
not at all. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
But it's scary.
Gotta bring the right weapons to the fight. That's what it is. So,
well, you know what I did? I disarmed her and I said, if you really don't have 500, first of all, why are you renting something on a lake if you only have 500 in your bank account because it couldn't get refunded? Well, but yeah, but then I said, I will give you a loan. My son's a lawyer. We'll have to draw up a contract, but I will provide you with a loan. I haven't heard from her. You just have to disarm it and take the wind out of the sail.
Yeah. But even that, what you've just described is a form of tension management. That's
right.
Exactly. Okay, I got a dash. And so thank you all very much for joining in, and we will pick up where we left off next time around. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
You too.